All right, now we're recording. All right, thank you everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our community conversation on what's happening with Yellowstone's wolves. My name is Johnathan Hettinger. I'm the communications director for the Park County Environmental Council. And we're thrilled to have another community conversation, which is a part of all of the ongoing series about all the different projects we're involved in throughout the community. Today, we're talking about wolves in Yellowstone National Park amid a historic hunting season. According to the park's website, 24 wolves have been killed in Yellowstone National Park from that Yellowstone National Park this year, including 19 in Montana in Wildlife Management Units 313 and 316, which are here in Park County. We recently circulated a petition asking the Fish and Wildlife Commission to immediately stop the wolf hunt in Wildlife Management Units 313 and 316. And that petition received about 750 signatures. And last week in an emergency meeting, the commission decided not to do that, but they decided to stop when the hunt in Region 3 reaches 82 wolves that have been killed. So far, 77 wolves have been killed. So it's not quite closed yet, but 5 more wolves, and it will be. So first, I'll do a quick introduction about PCEC, and then I'll pass it over to our guests. But first, a little Zoom reminder, please mute your computer and be respectful of all of our speakers. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat as they arise, and we'll have plenty of time to go through them at the end of the presentations. As always, today's presentation is recorded and we'll share it on our website and on our YouTube. So the Park County Environmental Council is your community conservation group with 650 contributing members and more than 3,000 supporters here in Park County. We work with people to safeguard the land, water, wildlife, and communities in Yellowstone's Northern Gateway through grassroots organizing and advocacy. Park County is a traditional homeland and current home to many indigenous people, including the Absaloka or Crow tribe. Park County today has a long tradition of human habitation, of people who loved and cherished and stewarded this place. We're committed to working together to honor this legacy and this place for future generations. We've been hosting these Zoom conversations about issues in our community for the past several years. Our goal is to help us all learn and gain a shared understanding of some of the most pressing issues we face as a community, so we can be more knowledgeable and prepared to advocate for this place. I know that wolves can be a really contentious issue, so we just ask everyone to be respectful and remember that everyone here is your neighbor, and we're all advocating for this place that we love. So today we're joined by Nathan Varley, owner of Yellowstone Wolf Tracker and Bear Creek Council President. Ashea Mills, owner of Walking Shadow Ecology Tours of Yellowstone and a Wild Livelihoods Steering Committee member, and Jeremy SunderRaj from the Yellowstone Wolf Project. So they have a lot to offer about how the hunt has affected Yellowstone's wolves and local businesses, and I'm really excited to hear from them. So I'll just pass it over. Whoever wants to go first, please go ahead.
All right, maybe I'll jump right in. Yeah, again, I'm Nathan Varley. I live in Gardner. I grew up in this community, a lifelong resident of the Yellowstone area, graduated from Gardner High School. So no stranger to the area, and watched a lot of issues arise and through the years regarding wildlife and border issues. In particular, this idea the animals in Yellowstone aren't necessarily treated like once they cross the invisible boundary of the park. And as Johnathan mentioned, I'm president, current chair of Bear Creek Council, which is a grassroots, local, all volunteer group based mostly in Gardner, although our members, many of whom are present today, stretch from here in Gardner all the way down the Yellowstone River Valley to Paradise and Livingston and beyond. many of our members are also somewhere else in the country and have joined our organization because they believe in our issues. And the issue we're talking about today is this idea that wolves leave Yellowstone Park and they end up being shot and killed or trapped and killed by sportsmen in the state of Montana. And I think what we'll hear today is a little bit more background about the wolves in Yellowstone for those that don't know a lot of background. Jeremy SunderRaj from the Yellowstone Wolf Project is probably the best person to talk about that because he is a biologist that works with the National Park Service to monitor the population and its individual members in the packs, the Yellowstone Wolf packs. And then also just kind of a bit of a history on where we are with this and how we got here. Basically, not long ago, wolves were an endangered species and no one could hunt and trap them basically anywhere. But due to their biological recovery and how successful that is, that changed in about 2012, and states around the park enacted harvest regimes. And we're not necessarily against those things, but in recent times, this past year, in fact, those have turned very extreme, we feel, and extraordinarily hostile towards a wolf population that means a lot to the people that come to the park, the people that live around the park. They're very valuable as an economic resource, let alone as just their inherent value to people and the ecological communities that they exist in. So I think we'll discuss a lot of different aspects of that today, and I think I would just kind of start out as saying that we've been part of an industry that relies on wolf sightings since their reintroduction in the mid-90s, and that industry has only grown. I have a lot of colleagues in this industry, including Ashea Mills that's on this call. We'll talk a little bit about that from her perspective, but we've really kind of seen how Gardner and other communities, Paradise Valley, Livingston, even on up to Bozeman, have these companies that specialize in wildlife sightings. And wolves are one of the marquee animals, particularly in the winter around now. Wolves are what people are coming to see and why they're hiring us to take them into the park, why they're staying at hotels and eating in local restaurants, and the whole reason they planned a vacation to our area. In respect to that, we have had a relationship with the state of Montana, it shares this border with Yellowstone in our area, for quite a long time, since they began taking wolves, or basically having a management plan that includes hunting and trapping of wolves outside the park. And initially, there really was no quota or limit to the number being taken, and that was a disaster. That was 2012, and we lost some packs, and a lot of individuals from packs, and it really disrupted the social fabric of the wolves in the park, and frankly made it harder for us to do our jobs. We weren't seeing as many wolves for a time frame in there for a few years, and because of the disruption. And gradually we began working with the state to suggest that, for one thing, we're here, we're Montanans, we provide jobs, we pay our taxes, we do all kinds of things that make this economic engine run in our area. And yet we don't feel supported when the state mandates hunts that chip away at the resource, that kill wolves that are so important, way more valuable alive than they could possibly be dead. So a number of years went by where we worked so closely with the Montana Fish, Wildlife Commission, and these were thoughtful people. They were interested in what we had to say. And we had them out to Yellowstone to actually experience what we were seeing. By golly, this is a thing. They saw hundreds of people out there looking for wolves, and actually saw them themselves. And I believe it was a September day when we do have a lot of visitors in the park, and Lamar Valley and other areas were sort of full with these kinds of tourists. And lo and behold, they take this information back, and the commission, voted to lower the quotas for the districts around Yellowstone in our area, particularly District 313, which is the Gardner Basin, to one wolf. Like, take one wolf and let's close it. So we were all right with that. It's just sort of like zero would be better, even more respectful towards our industry. But yeah, okay, one sacrificial lamb, we can lose a wolf or two. But recently, with the change of administration and drastic rules about killing wolves were enacted by the legislature, and the new members came in and felt that it was their mandate to get as many as they can, and resultingly lifted all quotas for these local districts, and just kind of had one for the region-wide district, a much bigger area north of the park and including much of southwest Montana. And so it was mind-boggling for us to have all that institutional knowledge and the work that we had done with the agency and with the former commission, at least, to just kind of wipe all that away. And they must have felt that mandate from the legislature was really compelling, or just wanted to kill more wolves. And it was probably a combination of those two things that led to this. And now we're kind of back in the same fight to hopefully end the unrestricted taking of wolves and reinstate quotas around the park, at least in the short term and possibly in the long term. So I think maybe, from my little piece of the introduction, I'll suggest that I toss it over to Jeremy to maybe talk a little bit about the wolf packs and how they got started, or where we were at with that in the last few years, and then how we're situated today, because I think he's got sort of the best sense of where we're at with the actual numbers and packs in the park near our boundary today. So will that work, Jeremy? You ready to jump right in and talk a little bit about wolf packs?
Yeah, sure. So over the past decade or so, Yellowstone's had a relatively stable wolf population. So when wolves were first put back into the park in 1995, we saw a pretty steep increase. They got up to about 170 wolves in the park overall. And then we saw a decline as they kind of stabilized. And basically over the last decade or so, since about 2008, we've seen an average of about 100 wolves with 10 different packs in the park. And it'll kind of oscillate around that. We've had years when it's been as high as 120, and then years it's been in the low 80s. This last year, at the end of 2020, our population was 123. The end of the year population this year will be officially listed at probably 94, 95. It's probably around 100, largely because of the harvest outside the park. So we've now, in the last couple of months, 23 Yellowstone wolves have been harvested. 16 of those were in Wolf Management Unit 313 north of Gardner. And then 3 in Wolf Management Unit 316 north of Gardner, and then 2 in Wyoming and 2 in Idaho. That's kind of a breakdown of what the population looks like right now. So we had probably about 125 to 130 wolves in the park in September. And today it's looking probably around 90.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. Ashea, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit, about your business and your role with the new Wild Livelihoods Business Coalition that just got started and has many issues that they're working on, but the wolf one is, I think, the latest adopted by this new business coalition. So, Ashea, are you ready to roll?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. Ashea Mills, and I live here in Gardner. And I came out here in 1995, just for a summer, sort of the common story, worked in the Mammoth gift shop and started reading all the books I could read. And within a couple of years, that led me into guiding. And since then, I've guided in basically all capacities, driving snow coaches, backcountry trips, front country, wildlife watching, geyser gazing, children's programs, lots of snow coach driving, you name it. And I've probably done it as far as guiding in the park. Park wide, which is one of the things that I really loved living in the interior. For the last, since about 2005, I started working for the Institute and I've worked for Nathan and actually several other names I see out here. We've crossed over in a lot of different ways, and including doing wildlife watching trips for Nathan and his wife Linda, and lots of different capacities. So yeah, having been guiding on this landscape, I got here about 4 months after the wolves did. And it's just been such a privilege to be here and watch all of it, the political changes, certainly the ecological changes, and really feeling deeply entrenched. I feel like I grew up here. I was 23 when I came out, and I do feel not quite in the same way that Nathan grew up here, but the most important parts of me were developed here, and this landscape is very much all of the reasons for a lot of what we do. My husband, a lot of you know, Mike Tursick, is an ecologist here in the park. He does a lot of different work with a lot of different entities around the country, but a lot on climate science coming out of the park, different types of studies with that. We decided to have a little girl here, largely landscape based. I don't think I would have done it a lot of other places, but I have a 9-year-old, and raising her in a wild place, raising her in this community, raising her with opportunities to see life and death before your eyes, and understanding how things really work. I was just back east recently, and it's hard to imagine our lives, how different they would be living in some of the places where my husband and I grew up. So I'm so grateful for this landscape. I'm so grateful for so many of the people here. And, one of the things that I recognized early on, and kind of why I migrated towards this end of the park as opposed to going west or south, had a lot to do with the authenticity of our community. The real people living here, not not just people who showed up for a week or two, but a real community, and a lot of people who came from a really different background than I did, and for either coming in from elsewhere or people who have been here for generations. And that is a lot of what I value about being here. So I did start my own my own educational guiding company. We do stuff in the interior, but certainly, especially this time of year, like Nathan mentioned, the only places we can get to in wheels are along the northern range. And of course, wildlife is always the focus as we're out there, and just finding this incredible suite of wildlife. So that authenticity and learning about this ecosystem, and not just within the park boundary, but really growing to value our ranching neighbors, our ag neighbors, not just for the lifestyle, but for the open space. We've all seen it. Every time a ranch gets sold around here, the end result is subdivisions and super Walmarts and more development. And I would say that's the second greatest threat to the ecosystem, is development. And so wanting to protect these open spaces and doing what we can to make sure that we have a thriving ecosystem is really critical. And it certainly doesn't end just right here at the park boundary. So we started Wild Livelihoods with that in mind, that there is this entwinement of economics and ecosystem, and working together with neighbors to make sure that we're all thriving and surviving and making a living in this place. Some of us that own businesses here have been concerned, particularly with this recent administration and some of their hardline stances. None of the guiding outfits that I know, or any of the guides, have been adamantly opposed to wolf hunting. I never have been. I think it's a tool. I don't love it, but I think, like Nathan said, just to reiterate that, there's a time and a place for some compromise outside of the park, and I think we had reached that. What's happening now is not a compromise, and it's really a serious death knell for a lot of our business. And again, we're paying our taxes and really trying to make a living here and also get along with everyone. So Wild Livelihoods, and I see Jeff on, and I think Casey's on, and a few other steering members, so they can jump in here at some point too. But I think one of the important things is to recognize that we're not asking for a complete shutdown of wolf hunting. We're just asking for a return to the 1 or 2 limit along the adjacent wolf management units in 313 and 316. These wolves that are leaving the park, you've heard this before, I'm sure you'll hear it again. The wolves, and you've heard maybe a lot about, is it a Yellowstone wolf or is it a Montana wolf? Well, if it steps over the line, it's a Montana wolf. But if, both the state and the park has come up with a definition that basically says if a wolf spends more than 50% of their time in Yellowstone Park and it dens in the park, then we consider that a Yellowstone wolf. And the wolves that we're talking about that are being hunted, particularly in the 313, spend more along the lines of 90 to 95% of their time. So there's really, those are good betting odds, right? These are not wolves that are hanging out in Paradise Valley or areas outside of the park. They're denning in the park, they're mating in the park, they're hunting in the park. They're living most of their lives inside of Yellowstone Park, and they are among the most viewable wolves in the world. When I first got here, they said, yeah, we've got wolves here, but nobody's going to see them. It'll be like Isle Royale or places like Denali where, you have to be in an overflight in order to see these wolves, or, tracking them or whatever. And within a couple of years, we were blown away. Nobody had any idea that we were going to see literally this soap opera, the death and the drama and the adultery and the murder, and you just had to get back out there the next day to see what was happening. And I very much am data based. I am very much science based, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about Wild Livelihoods is if you go on our website, there's just tons of economic data about how critically important these animals are to our livelihoods, to the sustainable economy of the North Yellowstone communities. So they are wild animals, right? And as this culture grew up around wolf watching, and you get to know individuals, and I often tell clients, you can see why we domesticated them. They're really interesting animals, and you can see why people come back year after year, day after day, to watch these animals. But what we have found in the ensuing 27 years is that they have also created a really stable year-round economy here in the North Yellowstone community, and that is really important to. It's an important measure. Just a couple of things that you can find on our website too. In Park County here, obviously we're the one and only year-round driving entrance. So this is the only place you can get to pretty much 365 days a year. Almost a quarter of all local labor income is fueled by travel, tourism, and recreation. So these non-consumptive entities, the hotels, the restaurants, the guiding companies, are a huge foundation of the economy of Park County. Over $200 million in non-resident tourism comes into Park County annually. And then the lodging tax revenue, which is obviously driven in large part by visitation to Yellowstone, is nearly $2 million that gets paid to Montana's general fund, including a small portion to FWP, to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So, this is a really entrenched issue. Small business proprietors or self-employment accounts for at least probably around 40% of jobs in Park County. So that's my husband and I. I'm so grateful that we've been able to make a living here. When I hear our governor talking about having a jobs-based platform and supporting small businesses, and then we have what's happening this year, it doesn't jive. I think we're going to open it up to questions at some point. There's lots more to say on all of this, but one of the things that I think is really important to point out. Wild Livelihoods did come out. We've sort of, a lot of us have been talking about this, like a more of a business coalition. My heart is in the field, right? My heart is out there digging through scat and seeing what somebody ate, and just getting our hands dirty. But at the end of the day, we've got a mortgage, we've got an increasing cost of living going on all the time, and I want to be able to have a sustainable life here for my daughter. So this group of us that have come together, I think all of us, especially on the steering committee, I mentioned Jeff Reed is on, I think Casey Anderson, Kara McGarry, a few others, that we do recognize that talking to certain demographics about how awesome wolves are and how much fun they are to watch and how interesting they are is not really getting us very far. We can love them, and I love all the wildlife. I love the grizzly bears and the bison too. But being able to talk about it intelligently and talk about how it hits our families and how it hits our livelihoods, how it hits our mortgages, making the next mortgage payment, that kind of thing, I think is really important when we're considering who we are making these asks of. And making sure that we kind of return to this part of the conversation. I think this is a different and very pointed way to just stay laser sharp on reducing the take on our north boundary and the reasons why. There's tons of reasons why biologically and ecologically, but making sure that we're keeping the economics as part of the conversation. And also know, and I do encourage you to go to our website, that we are talking about a lot of other issues. Like I said, I very much believe we need to protect our ag neighbors and our ranching neighbors and our ag producers. And so other issues too, like elk payment programs, making sure that that space stays open, river issues, all of it coming down to consumptive versus non-consumptive, and how we're all at the end of the day going to be able to stay here and continue to make a living and continue to work on protecting and preserving this place.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And I really appreciate all the input. And yeah, Wild Livelihoods is a co-host today, and PCEC is proud to partner with Wild Livelihoods. So thank you, Ashea, for explaining that. And if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I was just kind of wondering, based on what you're saying about what's happened this year, how has the landscape changed? I mean, is the park different? Like, are the wolves behaving differently? What have you guys seen spending all this time out there?
Yeah,
I'm going to let somebody else answer that, but real quickly, I'm going to drop a link, and thank you, Johnathan, for the link to the Wild Livelihoods. I'm going to drop another link into the chat box that particularly those that come to our area and use guiding services or just coming in on your own, a way that we are working to collect some comments. So you'll see that showing up. And I know I've heard a few folks saying, we're not coming back to Montana until this ends, but I really want to encourage you to spend your money on businesses that are promoting sustainable tourism, and that's not just a plug for Walking Shadow Ecology or Yellowstone Wolf Tracker or anything. I think all of us can use the support, particularly towards sustainable and non-consumptive livelihoods here. So I think Jeremy or Nathan, you'd probably be better off answering that last question.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick, and maybe Jeremy will want to say something too. But I think I speak for the general guide community, many of which are represented here on this call today, because we're so invested in this. But that the guiding's been tougher. We're kind of already seeing the signs that that the wolves are more shy around people. I think one of the reasons you see wolves persist on a landscape when they're heavily persecuted is they adapt quickly to the idea that humans are dangerous and might want to kill them. So they're intelligent animals. And we are seeing that because Yellowstone wolves have not been under fire so greatly for quite some time, that they are perhaps more naive and we're more vulnerable to these changes in the hunting regulations and the implementation of numerous other draconian methods to just kill more wolves. And we're seeing that in the harvest numbers that the state provides, that it's disproportionately skewed towards this small area around Yellowstone. What we see inside the park where they're still protected is the aftermath of that they maybe don't want to be around as much. One of our guides, Taylor Bland, told me yesterday, it's like, yeah, if you catch Junction Butte pack, who's been the best pack for us over the last 10 years, you're going to do it first thing in the morning, and then they're going to clear out. Then they're gone. And that makes sense to me. That's how wolves adapt to the presence of humans. So I would say that, worldwide where ecotourism occurs, you never find the combination of hunting and watching. It just doesn't work, right? So in Africa, in Asia, and places where people go to see iconic wildlife, you don't find that the population, the individual animals you're looking for to see are also ones that get hunted, because they don't let themselves be seen in that kind of way. And so I would point out to the wildlife professionals who are managing this travesty that we can't have both. And that's why we're speaking out so much, that it's not a numbers game and there'll be some wolves left for us to watch. No, it's changing the whole dynamic for us beyond just dead animals. So that's a part that I would emphasize in this whole conversation, and why we're upset that, like, oh, there should be some wolves left for them, but it's like, no, they change. Sometimes these packs come unraveled because of the death of one individual. And so what we've come to really enjoy in our industry is watchable wildlife. And that's the parts that's changing the fastest right now, I would say. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I think the only thing I'll add, Nathan, I don't have a whole lot to add to it, but it's pretty obvious when you lose a large number of the wolves, there's going to be less to be seen, right? I mean, it's not like, being a biologist, it's not like you need a scientific model to prove that. If you have fewer wolves, it's going to be harder to see them. So that's all I'll add to that. But
So Jeremy or Nathan or Ashea, I was just wondering, could you give us a little bit of background on the Phantom Lake pack, both kind of the history of it and maybe what happened with it during this hunting season?
yeah, so the Phantom Lake pack formed in 2019. This last year we had, there's not a whole lot of working radio callers in there, but they spend a lot of time in the area right near the park. So they'd be a pack that leaves the park more frequently. And, basically we've seen about 6 of them have been harvested now. And we're not sure that they even necessarily exist anymore. It's difficult to keep track of them. But that's a basic background on them. So they, I know they had at least 6 pups this year. And then, we've lost at least 6 of them in the hunt.
So we're starting to get some more questions, which kind of goes to that. It was the last week, the FWP Commission was questioning, how do you know if a wolf is a Yellowstone wolf? So I guess, do you have an answer to that?
I can answer that one. Yes. So it's a good question, right? But we are fortunate enough to see these wolves very frequently in Yellowstone. And so with the timing of everything, a lot of times you can say the pack left the park, right? We know they haven't been seen in a few days. The harvest goes up and they return and we're missing X number of wolves. That matches the harvest, right? It makes sense. You can kind of piece that together. So it's relatively easy with packs like the Junction Butte pack that are seen frequently. With other packs, of course, we have GPS collars, so we know where they're going, and then you can, see a lot of times where the harvest was and if it matches up like that. So a good way to answer that is we know it through GPS collars and then observations post and after harvest, or prior to harvest and then after harvest. So that's the best way to answer that question.
Thank you. And Nathan or Ashea, have you seen an actual downturn in bookings, or heard from, or is it something that you're hearing from customers?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like the news of this is getting out, and partially we're trying to raise the alarm, and local, regional, national news outlets are taking us up on this and putting the story out there for everyone to hear. And I feel like that really has had a chilling effect on bookings for the future. It's a kind of a split screen reality of like the people that we're busy with right now, taking them out there to try to find wolves. They might have booked a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and then they're continuing on with their vacation. And in a lot of cases, these people are kind of arriving to Yellowstone with no idea what's about this entire issue. So we're seeing those people and educating them. It's like, yeah, this is going on. We're trying to put a stop to it so that you and others can continue to come and enjoy these wolves in the future. But yeah, I kind of feel like we're hearing from people that are saying, yeah, I wanted to book, but maybe I'll hold off for a while, or just frankly, like, you guys are the good guys, but I don't want to spend my money in Montana. Like, those guys don't deserve it. So there is that tension going on, and we do fear, going back to that behavioral change of the wolves, that if this does become harder, why we can certainly expect that we will lose bookings in the future if your chances of actually seeing what you came to see go down to next to nothing. And that's what we kind of fear the most, is sort of the idea of boycott, or that it just becomes untenable to do what we do. Those two things.
And to follow up on that, the web link that Ashea posted is trying to quantify just that by allowing consumers to provide their sentiment and how much they spend here. It's important to remember that the guiding industry, whether it's consumptive or non-consumptive, is a small portion of the economic dollars that are spent in the region, which go to gas stations, to Bob's ATV, to lodging, and so on. And we have that pretty much quantified, but we're also letting them, just provide consumer sentiment. I tend to take it up to a business level, and if you were Apple's chief marketing officer and this was happening in the press, you would get in front of it or you would be fired. And so the reason you get in front of it is because it's always hard to quantify whether someone came through with something at scale, but marketing is marketing, and there's a reason you market in a certain way. And it's hard to argue that there won't be an impact. Quantifying it's a different thing, but at least giving people a way to do it. And I think we have 50. I only put it up on the website on Sunday, but just some follow on there.
Thank you. And it looks like Melba Coleman had a comment that her business has been affected. Melba, would you want to speak about that at all?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. My video is not working for some reason. That's good, because I don't look as beautiful as the rest of you. Since this year, well, in the last 2 years after they had lowered the units of 313 and 316 surrounding Optics Yellowstone this year, when they started hunting in this area, I noticed sales dropped. Now, of course, we dealt with COVID, and that also had stopped a lot of our normal wolf watchers that came in. These customers have been following my partner, Doug McLaughlin, since 2014, when the business was established. And since then, most of them come 2, even 3 times a year. Though they did not buy scopes this last year, they have decided to cancel a lot of their regular stays. These clients of ours come in 2, 3, even 6 weeks, depending. Right now, I should have a waiting line for scopes rentals. No, they have refused to come in, and spend the money for Montana while they're going to kill Yellowstone wolves. Now, I have had, of course, the opportunity of knowing these guys for a long time, and they support small businesses and all over. I did recognize what Ashea stated, that they should come in anyway and support even all of us, because we are trying to do something together as a community. But they will not, as they stated, they would love to stay with Doug and I if I could feed them and house them, but they are not going to sink money in Montana revenue, period, as long as they are not going to support a protection around Yellowstone National Park and its wolves, considering Region 3, basically 313 and 316. The cancellations that we received are huge, as I stated. I'm not going to mention how much money we've lost in rentals, but I can tell you I'm looking at scopes right now when normally I have a waiting list, and that's not good. We do get a lot, of course, neighboring, just as Ashea's business, Wolf Tracker, and other guides. We all support each other. They go out, they have some of our scopes, and or will not have their scopes after these guides have shown them how to view them. And of course, we were implemented. We work in conjunction with everybody, and we're losing, because they're not going to take the chance of spending the money even a day, let alone a week, per chance of not even seeing a wolf for 2 or 3 days. You understand that when you come into the park, these animals are wild. I mean, you could be here a week and not see a wolf. It's just, luck of the draw. But Montana has decided to do this, and they have decided to basically protest, which of course hits us.
Thank you, Melba, for sharing your what's been happening with your business. I know a lot of people last week at the Fish and Wildlife Commission, a lot of local people wanted to make their voice heard, but unfortunately, the public comment was limited to 30 minutes. And I know a lot of people weren't able to talk about their story and kind of explain what this means to our community. So PCC, we're trying to help organize a letter to the editor campaign, different places across the state. So if anyone wanted to make a comment and was unable to, feel free to contact me, and we can help you kind of turn that into a letter to the editor and make sure your voice is still heard. So thank you. And I guess question for I think Ashea or Jeff is, what's the best way for people to support wild livelihoods?
I can go ahead and start, and then Jeff, if you want to chime in. And I did just see, was it Jesse suggesting maybe a decal that wildlife friendly businesses can display in their window? I think it's not a bad idea, especially for folks that are coming in that are hesitant to drop money where they might not, want to support businesses, or do want to support other businesses. Checking out our website, I think, is one of the first things to do. We'll keep you posted on next steps. We're working, like I said earlier, kind of a pretty razor sharp focus right now in terms of the wolf issue on getting those quotas back down to 1 or 2 per WMU. So I would say one of the most important things to do is to amplify our voices. And again, this goes back to an earlier comment I made about how much we appreciate particularly visitor comments and things, but I think we really need to stay focused on the data, whether that's economic or biological, and there's some great data out there. So when you're making comments, including, and maybe somebody can drop a link in, attending the next Fish, Wildlife, and Parks meeting on the 4th, and if you aren't able to make public comment, then sending in letters explaining who you are, but also keeping it very data driven. I think that's a really important component to this argument, particularly with the demographic that we're talking to. And I saw an earlier comment too, I think Dan Bailey, and I don't have it right in front of me here, asking about how can we clarify, how can we address this issue when we discuss Yellowstone wolf mortality in terms of Ken McDonald referencing that the park is responsible for management of certain wolves. Basically, when they cross the boundary line, it's a Montana wolf. I was a little disappointed to hear Ken McDonald say a couple of kind of concerning things like wolves are maintained by Yellowstone National Park. That right alone let me know that was sort of an out of touch term. We don't maintain any populations. We monitor, we research, we watch. And then he also said, somebody asked about, what do we consider a park wolf? And he said, well, we have to confirm that with the park. And I thought, this isn't the time to be, FWP works really closely with landowners across the board, large landowners, ag producers, everything, all these other stakeholders. And Yellowstone, especially with the letter that Cam Shally, our superintendent, sent, pretty directly asking for a reduction or a halt on the hunt this year on the adjacent WMUs, was pretty much soundly ignored. I think encouraging FWP to listen to all of the stakeholders, listen to all of the adjacent land managers, whether that's agency or private, and also using data when you are, and like I said, check out our website. We've got a lot of good stuff. And then do you want to add anything to that, Jeff?
I would just say there's kind of three things that we're doing for next steps. The first is what you said. The most important thing you could do is if you own a business that operates in a zip code in Park County, or someone who does, encourage them to check out all the various projects we're working on, and especially the wolf harvest limits right now, and to sign up as a business. Regarding that question with Mr. McDonald, we are engaging with local FWP resources, including the FWP Region 3 biologist on these sorts of topics, and the commission on how quotas will be defined next year in WMUs 313 and 316. That conversation has to start now. You can't wait till August to do it. We're only focused on those two regions, and we're staying very hyper local. We all remember what happened to businesses here when the 2016 fish kill got national attention, and FWP did engage. I remember Scott Opitz's engagement. It was a tough situation, and they need to engage face to face now on this topic. And to date, they haven't offered to meet, but we believe face to face they haven't offered to meet. Everything's been digitally. But we believe they're turning the corner on that particular topic, and more businesses will make the difference. The second major thing we're doing is an economic study update to primarily Duffield and others on the value of wolves to the local economy here in South Park County. We hope to have, kind of, let's call it a basic version of that done by this summer. And it's similar like PCEC did to help quantify the fishing industry's local economy dependence upon clean water. We'll focus both on fisheries and wildlife, not just wolves, and how we can better quantify their ecosystem services in the context of business profitability. We'll also focus on quantifying both non-consumptive and consumptive use of wildlife. For example, a hunting outfitter would be a consumptive use. Ashea's business would be more of a non-consumptive use. And how much GDP do those types of businesses contribute to the overall recreational economy, which dominates our area? Hunting outfitters aren't a target. To best of my knowledge, there's 3 that outfit around those 2 units, and 2 of them make a good portion of their money on horseback riding and camping and that sort of stuff. So it's non-consumptive. How much is the question that we're trying to quantify with this study? We're also doing surveys that we mentioned just with consumer sentiment that Ashea posted on the website. And I think that link's in there, and if it's not. So those are kind of primary next steps, and then ideas like Jesse's, are going to be available to our business members as well as we roll out. Remember, we are not a 501(c)(3). We're never going to take a dime. We aren't going to take a bounty like is being advertised right now for $1,500 to shoot a wolf in our area, being advertised by people who aren't from here. They're from the Northwest, and best I can tell, it's a group started out of Wyoming. We do business the old-fashioned way. We earn it, and we're not about taking charity dollars, but things like this economic study, people will have an opportunity to donate to. That'll be routed through, other NGOs to produce that economic study that will house and will be open to the public for anybody to house. So keep that in mind. And several of us and many of you have put your neck on the line. This is not an easy topic to be a local, for example, me, an ag producer, and go public on. You see the threats on Facebook, and that sort of stuff. So you're just remembering that we're trying to be sensitive to businesses and not just list them on the website. Eventually we will. Also, air cover. I think that's important to remember in a civil and productive way. But that air cover is extremely valued because this gets exhausting. So I'll shut up.
Thank you, Jeff. I was also, I noticed Dan Vermillion, former Fish and Wildlife Commission member, has his hand raised. Dan?
Yeah, hi, thanks very much for putting this program on. The other thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention and remind people is understand that Pat Byor's term ends this year. So there'll be a new commissioner that's going to be appointed in January of 22 or 23, I guess, next year. And so I would encourage everybody to be thinking about a moderate person that you can put forward that makes it hard for them to say no, because I think that there's a lot of momentum right now, and you do have some members of that commission that were surprised by the economic arguments and if you look at just the livestock loss in Park County and Montana in the last year, it's Park County 16,000. If you look at Montana, it's about 300. And so the economic argument here is so strong. And if you look at what's going on with a lot of the elk proposals that they're going to look at tomorrow and the next day, these are economic proposals. And I think it's worthwhile pointing out that if you're going to listen to economics and outfitting motivations in central Montana, you should give the same respect to the folks that live down in our neck of the woods. So I just to put that on people's radar screen, I would really encourage you to think about what you can do to kind of affect who they appoint. There'll be a lot of applicants, but perhaps we can find somebody to get behind.
Thanks for mentioning that, Dan. I think obviously that level of engagement would be, a real commitment to. So I second that strongly. Be thinking of who we can get in that would be a good moderate candidate. But also I think just kind of keeping engaged with the issue because. A couple of things that have been mentioned. McNeil earlier mentioned in a comment the fact that we're basically in breeding season right now. So if one of these males, a breeding male gets taken out, that's pretty much a death knell for that next year's litter. And also a lot of times the alphas, if they get taken out, or a more dominant wolf in the pack, the youngsters are just kind of like lost and confused, and they end up getting into more trouble. They're not focused on hunting and where to hunt and how to hunt. They don't have that cultural landscape knowledge that the older wolves have. So that can lead to more conflicts outside of the park. So kind of keeping yourself engaged in some of these details. And also Kim mentioned that wolves are not on the agenda for the 4th. We tried, as you can imagine, and they are not on the agenda. So any kind of comments would have to come through public comment, open mic, who knows how much time we'll have. Letters are really important, but also, again, making sure it's data-driven, fact-driven, and check out if you can, and I'll see if I can drop a link in here, or maybe somebody did the elk quota numbers, which is really hot and heavy right now. If you Google some recent news from the Missoula Current on the meetings that happened a couple weeks ago, a month and a half ago now, where the hunters were up in arms over changes that FWP was proposing, because pretty much across the state and certainly locally, we're either at or above objectives for elk numbers. And there's a little more complexity to that, but we're not in any dire straits of losing our elk population. They're not being over harvested generally. There's, again, a little more complexity to that, right, over in 313. But those are some really important talking points, when we're talking about this. And I encourage all of you to learn a little more about the elk issue and why the hunters were up in arms about some decisions, and FWP quickly pulled some proposals that sounded a lot like privatizing elk on making it more available on private lands. So it's really complicated, but one of the best things you can do is just as much bandwidth as you have, try to stay abreast of these details and issues and the
Thank you.
process.
Thanks, Ashea. I guess so. We try to keep these to an hour, and we're approaching that hour. But I just kind of wanted to end on a little bit of so we've talked a lot about the economic value of wolves and about how people come from all over the world to see them. I think they're a major reason why a lot of us live here. That wolves are it just feels like it is a complete ecosystem. It changes the place that we're in. And I feel like, I don't know, Nathan, could you speak to that at all about the people that come here and what wolves mean to them and also what they mean to you?
Yeah, I'd love to just make a quick comment about that. Is that, in an ideal world, we could just say the value of wolves are so great just from an intrinsic viewpoint that they're part of a native ecosystem and belong here. And furthermore, we identify so greatly with them, many of us do, on an emotional level. And we say that all the time in our guests, our clients that come to Yellowstone, that value being reflected in their experience. And my own too. I wish I could stand up in front of these people and not make an economic argument and have that kind of emotional level impact to them. And I think for many of us, probably most of us on this call, wolves matter. Wolves are important. From the standpoint of management and politics, maybe not as much, but that's why so much of this is taken an economic thing. And I would encourage everyone, just as a final comment, to go out in their conversations and try not to frame this up as a narrative of Yellowstone wolves versus Montana wolves. It's just like, no, these are Montana wolves that live near Yellowstone, and they're different, and they need to be managed differently than the rest of the state.
If you don't mind too, I just want to pile on that and make sure people don't think that wild livelihoods is about economics in the negative sense. There's a great verse from a religious text or a spiritual text about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And economics is just a proxy to values. And so I really encourage you not to separate economics from values. They're intrinsically tied together. It doesn't mean that you have to spend money to go hike or stay in a campground for free or near free to enjoy what a carnivore means to you. But how you spend your money is also your values. And I just want to get away from this conversation that capitalism is a bad thing all the time. It can be a very positive thing and can be a spiritual thing too, how you spend your money.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Nathan, Ashea, and Jeremy, and everybody for taking time today. We really appreciate it. We will be circulating a recording of today's conversation in a follow-up email to everyone who registered, as well as some next steps. And yeah, feel free to contact me, and we'll put in how everyone can get involved. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to spend with us today. So thank you.